You might want to maximize the screen to see the tiny words that will be appearing. If you can't find a way to make the screen bigger, you might want to look at the URL that I included with the task item link or section of this bundle. There should be a URL somewhere, and if you copy and paste it, you should be able to maximize the screen. Anyway, you're just about to read Do a Learn Smart task where you get a more in-depth but still somewhat general introduction to metaphysics. It's going to be much broader and much more in-depth compared to what you got in Unit 1, but you are going to see that it's still general insofar as, you know, he's only giving you a taste of what you can do in metaphysics. That's just that this taste is going to be broader and a little bit detailed with some more questions and concepts, and hence a better understanding of what you're getting into. So as you know, we are, of course, in the discipline of philosophy, and like I said, we're going to be focusing on metaphysics now, and that's what Lahi will be focusing on at first. It's just the general branch of metaphysics, what gives rise to it, why are people interested in it, what does the word metaphysics even mean. After that, he's going to be introducing you to some problems, some puzzles that metaphysicians are interested in, or at least in the context of introducing you to metaphysics, he's going to introduce you to something called the mind-body problem. You're going to be reading about the mind-body problem, and in doing so, you're going to learn about a couple of different categories of theory, which include metaphysical monism, which itself can be broken down into a group of theories called metaphysical materialism, which itself can be broken down into physicalism, which itself can be broken down into reductionism and eliminativism. Now, you're also going to be introduced to metaphysical idealism, and we're not going to get really into much detail with metaphysical idealism, but we will get into some detail with respect to metaphysical materialism. I'm going to need you to know what the gist of metaphysical monism is, what the gist of metaphysical materialism is, what the gist of metaphysical idealism is, like when he first introduces those. Then I'm going to expect you to build a little bit more knowledge with respect to physicalism when he presents the physicalist response to another theory that I'm going to mention in a minute, which is dualism. You're not going to have to worry so much about the details of this group of theories within physicalism. You are going to want to just focus on what he calls the positive and negative case, or the positive and negative pillars of physicalism, especially as it is a response to dualism. So keep that in mind. But you're not going to have really in-depth knowledge of these two. Just be somewhat familiar with the gist of these two theories, what makes these two theories different from each other, and how do they connect to physicalism, how are they different aspects of physicalism. Metaphysical idealism, I just want you to know the gist of that as a category of theory. You're not going to need to get into a lot of detail about that. Read about metaphysical idealism, learn about the different categories of theory within it, but don't get stuck taking a lot of notes. Just this is going to be the main part of what you need to know when he does the introduction to metaphysical idealism, but I don't expect you to know a lot of details with respect to any theories or theories within theories after he gives you the general introduction to metaphysical idealism. I want you to pay more attention to physicalism generally, and then a little bit to these two items. Another thing that I want to point out is that when you're doing the smart book reading, keep what I'm saying in mind, and then read to understand, read for the forest, read to get a sense of the whole of metaphysics or how a theory works. Don't get so caught up in the trees. Don't take notes about every single little thing if you can help it. I would rather you wait for the study guide or outline where you'll have a whole week to get into the trees. So if I want you to know something specific, about physicalism, I'm going to let you know in the study guide. If I want you to know something specific with respect to these two, I'll let you know. And then you can go in and focus on the trees. But don't stress out trying to understand every single little thing here. Okay, so continuing on, when it comes to the mind-body problem, you're also going to learn about a position called metaphysical dualism. There's a theory within that called mind-body dualism, and there's a version of mind-body dualism that you'll get introduced to that's called interactionism. Now, we're going to learn about two interactionist theories. One's going to be René Descartes, And I'm going to really want you to pay attention to the context of Descartes' thinking, whatever Lawhead has to say about Descartes, his arguments. You've got to really know his arguments. You've got to be able to present his arguments to me, probably in the exam is what I'm thinking, in test 3. So get really well acquainted with what Lawhead has to say about Descartes, any principles, theories, arguments, premises, conclusions, any challenges for Descartes, including Descartes' original text, that is the excerpts that Lawhead presents to you and discusses and includes for your enlightenment. You're also going to want to get acquainted with David Chalmers and his version of dualism, which is called, his version of interactionism, which is called property dualism. And really, it seems to me that both Descartes and Chalmers are both property dualists. They're both interactionists, both of these theories being subcategories of mind-body dualism. And so you're going to see how a metaphysical dualist might respond to the mind-body problem. You're going to see how a metaphysical monist might respond to the mind-body problem. All right, so another problem that we will be introduced to has to do with freedom and determinism. That's how Lawhead first introduces this strand of metaphysics, this concern of metaphysicians. I'm going to call it the problem of causality, and I really need you to remember that, especially for the test. I might ask you, what were the 2 problems that we focused on in metaphysics? Or I might ask you, on which problem is a given speaker in a dialogue focused on within metaphysics. And by looking at the dialogue, you're going to have to look for textual clues to say, okay, they're focused on the mind-body problem, or okay, they're focused on the problem of causality. And I might have it as multiple choice, but I might have it as fill in the blank. So make sure that you've got my terminology down. And I think I'm fairly good about letting you know when I'm using my own terminology or giving you a definition that I like for some particular reason, whether it's clarity, precision, or maybe even some kind of like consistency. So I wanted to call this the problem of causality because that really is the issue between metaphysical camps labeled as determinist and metaphysical camps labeled as what we might call compatibilist, or people who believe that we do have free will, unlike determinists who don't think we have free will. I want to call the whole discussion and question about freedom the problem of causality. Okay, that is what I think Lawhead really should have called his introductory section that he labels freedom and determinism. We're not going to get into any details right now about the problem of causality. I'm not going to give you an overview of how the Lawhead discussion flows because we're not going to get to this until Unit 3. This is what we're going to be focusing on for Unit 2 and Test 3. Metaphysics will obviously overlap insofar as we'll still be doing it during Unit 3 and Test 4. So you'll not want to forget the basics that you learn in his general introduction to metaphysics in the reading that you do on Way to the Mind-Body problem. You will need to know some general stuff still when you get to over here in the test for this. But for this unit, for bundles 4 and 5, we're going to be focusing on these things here. And like I said, I want you to read for the big picture. I've told you, what you might want to focus on and pay more attention to. Read generally for understanding and to get the practice items done, or the quiz or review, whatever Connect likes to call it, knowing that the study guide will let you know what you really need to focus on, what you really need to study more in depth, what you need to take more notes on. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, one last thing. Notice the different columns, I guess you could call them here, or the different sections. Some people call them levels in my diagram. This word right here, philosophy, names a discipline. This is a branch. These are problems that the branch are, concerned with. And notice how I'm using coloring to show you this. These are categories of theory that has something to say within a problem or a concern of metaphysics. This right here are 2 subcategories of theory that fall within a more general category of theory, and so on. Again, here we have a problem that is of concern to some metaphysicians, and here we will be adding general categories of theory and then perhaps subcategories of theory. But for now, you need to know that this is the discipline, this is a branch, these are problems within the branch, and then we start to break things down in terms of theory. So make sure you know when I'm asking you a question about like discipline, what discipline is this? What branch are we in? What problem are we exploring? What are the different general positions you can take with respect to a problem? What are some of the theories that each general position breaks down into, and so forth and so on. Now, of course, eventually we will get to epistemology during the last unit for test 5, and we'll cover those details as we approach the said unit and test. We'll be developing this little map, and I hope it provides a helpful clue or visual for you. You might want to redo this part and even take notes as you go through the reading, just the gist, or use this as a study guide. You can write notes underneath. Just keep that in mind as you're doing the diagram, maybe leaving some space.